Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's roundtable on sustainable finishing methods in textile manufacturing. This is a topic that has warranted increasing interest over the last few years, and technology companies have been working hard to find solutions to one of the most unclean areas of the textile and apparel industry. So I'm Madeleine Thomas. I'm editor of Industry Digitalisation here at the World Textile Information Network, the host of the Innovate Textile and Apparel Virtual Trade Show. I'm also the editor of a number of our journals, Digital Textile, International Dyer and Finisher, and Textile 4.0 journal. So I'll be your host for this roundtable, and I'd like to introduce you to our participants, who are all from a range of backgrounds. So firstly, we have Dr. Christian Schumacher, an expert in textile dyes and chemicals. He is the founder and managing director of Step Change Innovations, a technology development and consulting company based in Germany. He's also responsible for the cellulosics business at Archroma, covering pre-treatment, optical brighteners, dyes and dyeing chemicals, and was previously global head of innovation and technology at DyeStar. Welcome, Christian.
Hello, Madeleine.
And then we have Rainer Tuxen, Managing Director of Spray Dyeing and Finishing Technology company Rota Spray. Hi, Rainer.
Hi, Madeleine.
And then also on the spray application side, we have Per Stenflo, one of the founders of Imogotech.
Hi, Maddie.
And then also we have Tobias Scher, Sales and Marketing Director at Waco, a company that also specialises in spray finishing applications. The company is known for the integration of non-contact, minimum and high precision application systems into the production process. Hi, Tobias.
Hi, Madeleine. Good morning.
And then moving on from spray applications, we have Femke Zylstra, Business Development at Daiku. The company is known for its CO2 waterless dyeing technology. Hi, Femke.
Hi.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Simon Q, Managing Director at Alchemy Technology, based in the UK. So the company recently launched its precision coating technology for medical textiles, and last year launched its smart dyeing technology, the Endeavour. So all our participants are, oh sorry, hi Simon, sorry I forgot to say hi.
Hi.
So all our participants are focused on more sustainable ways of dyeing and finishing, reducing water consumption, chemical use and energy usage as well. So just before we begin, I think it's worth mentioning that if you have any questions for our participants, then please feel free to submit these in the live discussion thread. So firstly, I'd like to begin by asking you all, has COVID-19 opened the industry's eyes to the benefits of sustainable finishing technologies? And how has COVID-19 changed the industry landscape? Christian, would you like to start?
Yes, Madeleine, thank you. Well, first of all, we have to say that COVID-19 is the biggest threat for the textile industry since decades. And I mean, the whole market is seriously depressed because of this crisis. We had months of lockdowns. There was a time when retailers canceled all the orders in Asia, Southeast Asia. It was a shock for the markets. So at the moment, people are fighting for survival, in fact. No? And new technologies, new investments are a long way apart for many players in this market at the moment. No? Mm. When you look at the segments, we can see trends that the different textile articles are affected in a different manner. For example, the fashion is seriously hit. In particular, fast fashion is under serious threat. Other articles are better, performing better. For example, home furnishing, home textiles. Casual wear, you can say, is better than formal wear. I mean, we're sitting in home offices. We're not wearing ties anymore. We're not buying shirts anymore for this. So the market is changing in this scenario. And we believe that in the long run, home office to a certain extent will stay as an option. And this will shift a little bit the market. Yeah, I think this from what this
Yes.
question should be it.
Tobias, do you think COVID-19 has changed the landscape in terms of finishing in textiles?
We do not see that COVID gives an additional push to this topic. I think it was still in discussion before COVID, and COVID made more a full stop, like Christian told, in terms of investments in this new technology. But before this period, we saw the past 8 months before COVID, we noted much more companies were focusing on sustainability in their production and investment planning. So this we still noted. And I think everybody is getting more and more aware on the fact that a permanently growing population and how we handle our worldwide freshwater resources and wastewater disposal could become a real problem in the future. So I think also we are using too much of non-sustainable chemistries and dyeing and finishing processes. So we should change it, and the time is now, I guess. So,
Rainer, do you agree?
Yeah, I also do not see a real eye-opening in that sustainability story. If you overlook the whole process chain, I think there's not a real motivation based on on this name sustainability. What people are now focusing is they are looking to streamline their ranges. They are reducing articles. They try to produce basics to survive. So in that ambient, innovation in sustainability is not the key point. On the other side, we always struggling with the definition. What is sustainable? I think that is a big issue. We should really talk about it in more specific details. Sustainability is, in most of the cases, generated on high gloss brochures, but very unspecifically defined what is the meaning. So that is something we should really discuss a little more in details in the future as well, especially in such a group or on more platforms where real details are coming up and not only the stories.
Uh-huh. And Femke, have you found that COVID-19 has changed anything for the finishing industry in any way?
Yeah, I think a lot of things have already been said, but short term, the priorities, I think, from any retailer, whatever market, is significantly changed. So there's indeed a lot of order cancellations, and that has an effect on cash preservations, which indeed means that more capital investments that help towards cleaning up your processing within a supply chain is definitely affected. So from our just selling machines perspective, we definitely see a change in our status of our order books. I do not think that sustainability has left the agenda. It is still one of the key goals from the United Nations, and a lot of brands that are trying to reach to their consumers and speaking on sustainability, they are up prioritizing the topic. And we do see from that perspective also an increased amount of brands linked with supply chain partners that are interested to understand the technology, that are really putting efforts together to valorize the technology and to see where the momentum is to communicate dyeing and finishing to their consumers. There is a lot of work gone into the past years on making the materials palettes more sustainable, organic cotton, recycled polyester. You could say it's becoming, it's understood by consumers. It could even be a criteria for yes or no buying a certain product. What's not being touched on yet is the true process behind it. So it could easily be organic cotton be shipped around the world wide because the supply chain is not centralized efficiently. Same as with dyeing and finishing, there's just a lack of, I think, chemical know-how, process know-howing, understanding the complexity of the supply chain. And then you do see that the speed of really cleaning up, also from the process side, it's not there yet. But I'd like to be positive, and I do see a lot of momentum from the bigger brands, really continuing with that push to move to sustainable practices and also, investing in projects. So that's positive. It's still slow. So, but it is still on the agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. And Per, what about for you?
I have to agree with what you said here and what Christian said, that the industry is definitely in survival mode. And I mean, that's not a time to be a visionary. It's a day-to-day business, staying alive. That's the reality for many of our customers.
Yeah.
And also, I think what Femke brought up here with looking at all the new sustainable fibers and recycled fibers, etc., that are coming on. And still, what happens with them? They go through the old dirty processes that we need to get away from, and I mean that's a bit sad. And now it's a question for the brands to really try to explain this also to the consumers. It's easy to explain a new fiber and the measurements on that, not as sexy or easy to explain the process with the chemistry and water and so on that goes into processing the fibers afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And Simon, what about for you? Because with Alchemy, you're launching your new technology that focuses on medical textiles. So surely that the time is ripe for that kind of technology.
Yes, so certainly something we've seen is that there's been a huge interest in what we're doing, which is coating textiles with antiviral chemistries. So I think COVID will result in the emergence of new classes of finishing, which are to assure hygiene or actively inactivate viruses. We've also seen some suppliers who've done very well. People who've been producing medical textiles, surgical clothing, face masks. Obviously, the new category of clothing which has become very important. So I think in general, what we've seen is the emergence of some new opportunities with a backdrop, obviously, as everyone's discussed, of a earthquake in the textile industry, which has really changed, capital availability and also companies' ability to plan for the future, really, which has been the big impact.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what would you say are the main barriers to investment in new sustainable finishing technologies? We have said that the industry is now in survival mode. Does that kind of change the barriers, or what were the main barriers before COVID-19 in investing in waterless dyeing, supercritical CO2 dyeing, or spray dyeing? Simon, I guess if you want to start.
Well, yes. So I think the major macroeconomic barrier is the availability of cash. So for many manufacturers, their cash has been consumed by handling this shock. My opinion is that this will result in quite a big reconfiguration of the textile supply chain, where there'll be winners and losers. The winners that emerge will most likely be more successful, and that is an opportunity for them to then adopt more sustainable technologies. This may take some time, so it's maybe a couple of years or something, but I think there will be quite a substantial shakeout, if you like, of some of the more polluting, lower standard suppliers out there. And certainly we've seen in our sort of day-to-day life that the loss of customers who were maybe smaller scale customers, but then more interest from the larger players who are looking to take up some of that business, I think, in the long term.
Mm-hmm. And Tobias, for you, in terms of spray dyeing, what have you found are the main barriers to investment?
I think the main barriers are not only for spray dyeing, for all new technology, is a mindset and the willingness to take also some risk and costs and make transparency, like Per and Christian told before about transparency of sustainability, and also the market demand. Yeah, if nobody buys what the manufacturer are producing and pay the bill, so nobody will make an investment. So my main issue is that the involved people must really have a passion for change. They must be really have passion for sustainable way of living and producing their products, and then they for sure will be also very successful. And we see also still during this present situation, there are people who are willing to invest money also now. And they see the future. They see also the combination, when it is possible, not only to make sustainable product, but on the other way, change their process and change their costing side. When if you combine all that, combining reduced costs with sustainable products and to create new products, which makes you unique as a supplier to the brands and retailers, then that's the way to do. So on the other side, the governments and the consumers and brands and retailers have to give the same push to the industry. Governments has to make more regulations on the use of fresh water or wastewater and how to treat their wastewater, and consumers must buy it finally. Yeah? So like in every industry, it's all the same.
Per, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, any investment in something new is a risk, of course. But what's really important here is that we have to be able to explain and convince that there's a good return of investment in the investment, not only on a sustainable side, but that it also makes good business sense in doing that. And here we could use the help of the brands, of course, putting pressure, and also governments with regulations and so on, making it more, increasing the incentive for the producers to go in the sustainable direction. Because sustainability alone will never cut it. There has to be the business side of it. That without that, it's not going to happen. That's I'm sure of.
Femke, I see you nodding with Per along with Per.
Well, I think especially just to tap in a little bit on the legislation, if the true cost of production would actually be paid, so if there's indeed a bigger incentive on what the true cost of cleaning water, of working with forbidden chemicals is, and you start paying the real cost, then I think the balance sheet of cost will actually change. With new technologies and often being extremely optimized. I say this speaking from the polyester supply chain, it's so optimized. Bringing in a new technology whereby still that level of optimization, we don't have the 200, I don't know how many years of actually doing the work at full production scale. So there, yeah, with new technologies, not having the confidence, it's not really helping to lower the barriers. So if regulations from governments could kick in and start paying the true cost, it definitely helps on the business case discussion. I do think it's not only depending on regulations. I must say within the industry, we are also doing a lot on efforts through NGOs. Think of the ZDHC, the work that they are doing to really address the chemical discussion on the table and make industries aware that impact needs to be made from their side as well. So part of the industry is extremely adaptive in trying to find solutions themselves. It's just not very quick. So I do think there is a need for regulations, but we're talking about barriers. So.
Rainer, what are the barriers for you?
Yeah, again, we are in the situation, we have to say, the poor market demand, especially in the fashion business, the poor order situation, of course, creates a poor cash flow, and that means in the companies, investment stop. This is the sentence which we are confronted with. And of course, there are a few companies are investing anti-cyclic. And from my experience, I had this situation in several times in the textile industry in the last 4 decades. People investing anti-cyclic in most of the cases are successful people because they utilize the time to change. They have the resources, they have the people available to develop new things, which is quite difficult normally under the normal production circumstances. So I'm quite optimistic. On the other side, a part which we are not able to influencing, what is the situation with our banking system? What is the situation with financial supports? I have some doubts that in different countries, the banks are really willing to support the industry because of some reasons. it's, I think, not an issue to discuss here. But I'm not so optimistic on that point, that the support is there, the financial support is there. So on the other, and finally, I have to say, we have some weak points also before COVID-19 in that industry. Mm-hmm. If I just make an example, to link the marketing people with the technical people and bridge building is a key point which has to be done. We have a lot of great marketing story, which is very rarely really linked down to the floor in production. So everybody knows we have the high gloss brochures on one side, and if we visit the companies, it looks like 15 or 20 years ago. So the realistic situation and the high gloss brochures, this is also a problem before COVID-19. So I think we should really utilize our know-how in such a group and many others together to link marketing, sales, technical issues, always with the roof of sustainability and a clear definition of sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Christian, for you then, what are the barriers in taking up sustainable finishing technologies for the industry? How can we overcome them?
I mean, the obvious point, this has been mentioned already. This is capital expenditure, it's cash, availability of cash. So I'm not going into that matter again. Then you have a barrier to anything what is new. You can say you have 100 people, 80% of the people are reluctant to change. Maybe 15% are willing to accept change, and 5% are the innovators, are the drivers. So you need to have the right mix in a decision-making level to be open to change. And this is sometimes lacking, especially in these days. Then it comes to the point of productivity. If you have a high capital expenditure for an expensive machine, you must have the productivity. For example, you could see, if you look at the history of inkjet printing, the first generations of digital printers were just too slow, so you did not have the productivity, and the industry did not pick it up till maybe 5 years ago, when the equipment was competitive from productivity, from speed point of view. Sometimes we need to explain the advantages, what it means. So, for example, just take the example of the supercritical CO2, which is a considerable investment with many nice features with benefits, but there are limitations also. The limitations, for example, is you don't have the complete color gamut. You don't have all the dyes are suitable for this. That means you would need to invest into R&D to have a complete portfolio. Who is doing this? We have a regulatory environment. You need to register new chemicals to REACH. Is it worth it? It's not worth it if you have 5 machines in the world for this. But if it's growing, if it has potential, it would be worth it that the chemical industry is looking into this, to do real serious research. And this whole story has to be brought together. And I mean, it was a lucky incident that Colortex has given that commitment and supported this development. And now also the multinational companies are supporting this development. And I believe the similar thing could happen in the case of the spray dyeing, although there the expenditure is not as high, but still it is a different process with a different application, and it could require different products which still need to be adjusted to that technology.
Yeah, if I just may add on to that, what I find, or what we see with our customers, is that their production supply chain is very geared up to water dyeing. And then I think color is one element, but more specific is the few steps you do before dyeing and the steps you do after dyeing. If everything is geared up for water dyeing, then there are still significant steps in your CO2 dyeing, for example, that are just in addition to that, need to change as well to really optimize your production process. And so it's never just alone the dyeing. It's always a little bit before and a little bit after. And then to really optimize your production, yes, you do need to check where you begin, right? What is the production volume you really put in your machines to really run productive numbers? And that is significant. Optimizing, scaling volume, that needs to be done. And that is where support from brands come in as well. Often, if they want to adapt the technology, they want immediately the whole A to Z, which is difficult because the skill at that size is then lacking. So it's quite a challenge to do it successfully for the supply chain and still make it completely valuable for brands. So a good understanding and scaling process is required. So it requires collaboration, basically, not only between technology and supply chain, but between technology, supply chain, brands, dye stuff suppliers, etc. And that's quite a new way of working, at least we see. It's intense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Femke, earlier you mentioned industry regulations. So these tiny regulations in manufacturing countries like China, for example, have they increased interest in new finishing technologies, or have people just kind of found different ways around these regulations? So basically, has real investment been sparked from these tightening regulations?
Yeah, in some cases, yes. If there is certain product you're dyeing and you have certain chemicals in your wastewater and they are forbidden, you have to look for alternatives. Mm-hmm. So that for us is a trigger to really make changes. We have prospect customers that have to make the change because of legislations. It's not the complete volume, but that is definitely a trigger. Mm-hmm. So it is reality.
Mm-hmm. And Christian, how do you think old dye houses and things like that have used the same practices for years can be persuaded to invest in new technologies?
Yeah, this is a good question. Huh? The industry is very conservative, as we know.
Yeah.
You need somebody to be the first, and sometimes this is a big challenge to find this guy who is the first. My experience tells me it is very often driven by the retailer, as Femke already indicated. The retailer support is the key. Mm-hmm. We have seen that. We have seen that in the case of, again, supercritical CO2, when Nike and Adidas supported it, then you had the installation in the market. And this is the key everywhere. If you have a retailer, a brand who is driving it, who is behind this, for whatever reason they do this, sometimes they want their own marketing story making out of this, but doesn't matter. It helps. It helps to support the penetration of this equipment, of these new technologies in the market. And apart from the brands and retailers, I think it's the legislation that has an impact. No? For example, if you have pollution control, which could be the showstopper for certain technologies, and this has really changed in recent years. Before detox, you can say, before the detox campaign, people were looking at the apparel level. Huh? So they were checking the apparel, and they were checking for the hazardous chemicals on apparel. But due to the detox campaign, which Greenpeace started, and then the ZDHC association has been formed, where many of the most prestigious retailers now are part of this. They have brought this from the apparel level to the effluent level. And this means it is now relevant at the place where the production is done. And it is also more stringently monitored in the markets. For example, in India, in China, they're closing down factories if they don't comply with the pollution control levels. No? Mm-hmm. So it is these two factors, the brands and the legislation, you can say, which drives this.
Yeah. Simon, has Alchemy been able to take advantage of this?
So certainly we've been seeing a lot of interest from the brands and the retail side in our technology. So I think Christian said that it's going to be driven by the brands. Manufacturers, I think, are willing to participate as long as their risk is reduced. And so that the key to that is really having a brand behind it who's willing to invest in the long term. A lot of that, I think, is going to be driven by consumer behaviour. So consumers are much more aware than they used to be. I think they're increasingly choosing to buy things based on sustainability credentials. That, I think, is only fairly recent phenomenon. So people have been aware for a long time. but really consumer spending habits haven't been driven by sustainability. That I think will change, but it will be maybe the next 10 years or so where you actually see consumers choosing to go for more sustainable products.
Mm-hmm. Tobias, for you, is it the legislation? Is that driving any change, or do you agree with Simon that it's the brands?
To be honest, we have not any data or proven data if the impact of the regulations has driven investments. What we can see that after new implementation, some more requests are coming up, but you never know what is the real reason behind, because we are only a small part of the full production.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no valid data for that question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Per, for you, does does the investment, high capital investment cost outweigh getting around any legislation or sustainability initiatives for companies in manufacturing nations?
I think I agree with what's been said here already on that topic. There is an aspect of that, and that is an important part of this. But to us, it's also been very important in looking at both trying to avoid disrupting existing supply chains in terms of the dye manufacturers, for instance, that are extremely important with their knowledge in the dye houses. They are an essential part in how the operations are driven today with the dyeing. So trying to avoid that, trying to stick with and using existing, basically off-the-shelf chemistries and dyes. I think that is very important. And then also trying to look into new business models in terms of how to reduce or lower the thresholds for the investments, and how to minimize the risk for the producers that are going to buy the equipment.
Mm-hmm. Rainer, do you agree?
Yeah, I also do not see real investments based on this legislation, but I think for all of us, the situation will change due to the situation that the order situation is poor. The batch size per order will getting smaller, and let's say also legislation comes into the boat, because the values, let's say set points for wastewater or whatever, is also related to an output of a company. But if the output is getting smaller and you run with the same equipment, of course all the value are getting dramatically higher. So this is, I think, a good opportunity for us, because as I understood, the design of nearly all of our concept is also especially for smaller lot sizes. Mm-hmm. More flexibility, higher variability, less material loss, less chemical, less water. So I think this is directly linked. If a same company is exchanging old technology, immediately the wastewater values will change dramatically. So mm-hmm. I think the order situation in the near future, I guess, will push the industry to go and to exchange existing technology. We have some areas in continuous dyeing, or if you see the denim industry, where we have huge machines which can be easily substituted with some limitations, no doubt, but this is our job to solve these things. But I think the pressure will come automatically with lower demand, smaller orders. I think this is something which is a real problem for existing companies in the near future. If they are not changing, they are losing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with the smaller batch sizes and you know, the lower production and the flexibility that you mentioned, I guess flexibility and the small production sizes are related to nearshoring and reshoring. Do you think that these new technologies like spray dyeing, for example, will help to move manufacturing closer to the consumer so that we can have this flexibility?
Are you asking me again?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I would say part of the story will be like that, because just simply consider the countries, the textile producing countries, who are able to ship by trucks. No need for sea shipments or air shipments. That could be a part of production shift, no doubt, and it has already taken place in some countries. On the long term, I'm not sure about it, because we are offering solutions also for existing textile countries. And what we are not able to influence, how are the trade rules changing in the near future? So you can talk about today, and you see some countries, and tomorrow a new trade rule is taking place, and all the models is damaged again. So I think there's a little unforeseen situation also due to this trade wars which are going on. And I think as long we are not stopping that, there is no clear picture for investments, and that is also a poor situation for every investment if the future is so unforeseen and it's so unclear. So that is also a political job to make sure in different regions that the investment has some, let's say, outlook for 5 or 7 or 10 years.
Yeah.
But don't forget, before COVID-19, what we have seen in 2019. Trade war, America, Europe. Trade war, China, America. Trade war, trade war, trade war. How can you as an investor plan? It's not possible.
It's a good point. Yeah. Per, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'd say, to some extent, in certain sectors of the industry, it might we might be able to help in bringing reshoring. But on the other hand, I mean, the large bulk of the fashion industry there has to be a giant leap on the automation of actually the garment production before it's going to come to Europe. That's something that's not happening right now, at least not to the level that it has to before it's going to happen or be a source of bringing back production to Europe or the US for that sake.
Yeah, okay. And Simon, I know that Europe has been an area of interest for Alchemy. Is that still the case? Do you think that this technology can help with nearshoring?
I think we're certainly seeing some of that happening. So we've seen a lot more activity in Turkey, for example, which is getting a bit closer to Europe. We're seeing some high value finishing going on in Europe, and that may be increasing. I think, as Per says, the likelihood of garment manufacture in market in Europe and the US is still quite remote, relative to the labour costs. But certainly, I think there's a general trend in the industry to move to smaller and smaller batches, to move the fundamental, the primary manufacturing closer to the consumer. So maybe bringing dyeing into garment factories, separate dye houses. I think also in investing in technologies that enable the brands to reduce retail waste, because there's a lot of discounting currently going on in retail. That's enormously expensive, and the same thing is actually true in e-commerce. So there's a lot of returned apparel, and that's very expensive as well. And so certainly, technologies which enable you to do smaller and smaller batch sizes and enable you to do that cost effectively are going to be popular over the coming years, I think.
Tobias, how do you feel about this?
I'm also not thinking that it will really relocate something in terms of there will be growing up new facilities, new manufacturing plants somewhere. But for sure, it's also for the traditional textile countries, it will help to survive for the existing companies, because they can be, again, a driver of the new technology, which is mainly making the high developed industry countries strong in all the other industry sectors beside textile, that they drive the market in terms of new developments, new technology. So they can take over the role of the pioneer if they want. but they have to take it. Otherwise, somebody else will pick it up. Yeah. But the chances are here because specifically if you look to this group here, I think everyone has specific advantages of his technology or his process knowledge, but everyone is saving a lot of costs again and able to create new products. If you look, I don't know if you can see that here, but if you think about single-side overdyeing, for example, on a denim wear or something like that, you have totally new products with half of the finishing costs. And why not to step into this? This is very easy. And I think you will see in the next month some of the new products in the market. And also like the other guy is saying that antiviral treatments, you don't need to do a strong padding process always where you are wasting 60, 80% pickup. You can do it easily with 10, 20%. And so there is no need to do, and you can directly save costs and be more sustainable. And then we have to work for sure on the chemistry side.
Yeah, okay. And Femke, as Christian said, you know, the supercritical CO2 technology is large and has a large investment attached to it. Do you think it could work in the nearshore, reshoring markets?
Yes, but it's things that are changing. The polyester supply chain is still very dominant in Asia, and it's a very optimized production process. So to bring that to Europe, you need to, there's very often a volume issue at this moment. And then it's interesting to see if you then look at using technology flexibility and having enough volume, it's a different way of collaborating. Sometimes you need to look at a collaboration model whereby a technology is used by probably by multiple owners. But what I do see very positive is that brands are really looking at polyester. It is very good for recycling. There is a very sustainable dyeing method that the CO2 dyeing can offer. And luxury markets are very much producing close to home with all the flexibility in supply in distance. So there is definitely a very big interest within Europe to explore sustainable textile production for the synthetic range. So, but it's not there. It all left to Asia many years ago, and it's extremely optimized there just to make a very strong business case for the supply chain here. And we are in the end supply chain people, right? We use the commitment from brands to scale and to get commitment. But in the end, I do think technologies need to work for the supply chain, and we need a very strong supply chain. And then it is a good momentum now to relook at that and to see what is suitable to bring back to Europe. And I think there is definitely momentum to do that. But it's unfolding at the moment. People are relooking at their business models and sourcing models to create flexibility there.
Yeah,
and that affects us as well.
Okay. Do you see this as well, Christian, that people are realigning their business models for reshoring?
Yeah, I see possibilities here. It will depend how the post-COVID world will look.
Yeah.
Definitely. So will we travel less? Will logistic costs go up? Also, this is linked with the CO2 footprint. If this awareness will be there or will increase. Logistic costs, perhaps it's not the best idea to ship the apparel around the world. Perhaps it is better from sustainability point of view to produce it in the region. Yeah. Then it's the issue of labor. What's the cost of labor? I mean, that has driven the industry out of Europe apart from the legislation. Labor, with the automation and digitalization, the relative share of labor in the production cost will be less. That means the disadvantage will be lower. Also, the cost in China is dramatically going up. Then you have to look at reach, European reach. This is now going global. some similar legislations you have now in China. It's actually even worse than in Europe. You have a similar chemical law being established in Turkey. You have a kind of REACH system developing in India. So that means this is catching you everywhere now. And this relative disadvantage will become less because of this. I mean, in Europe, we know how to deal with these things. We have experience with this now. It's about 10 years into the legislation of REACH. Could help if the others don't know how to deal with this. Maybe this is wishful thinking now because the bottom economics, after all, matter. But I see this in certain ways. I see this as a perspective that it could help us for reshoring, automation, and the experience in dealing with chemical laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned all the different, legislations there that have to be met by chemical and dyes companies. It must be so hard to develop something that reaches everybody's standards, I guess, and it must just confuse things to have so many different standards. You'd think we'd be able to have kind of one overarching body that everybody must adhere to globally.
Well, at least within the European Union, we have this as a standard now. And
Yeah.
the others, they are somewhat relying to that process. It's not
Right.
entirely different. It is related.
Uh-huh.
However, you're dealing with different authorities. Like in China, for example, you're dealing with different authorities on even on regional level, not like in Europe where you have a central agency for this. It's not easy, and it is absorbing a lot of efforts, resources. I mean, when I was young and I joined the industry, we had a big research department and one person looking after this environmental legal things. Today, you have an army of people, own departments looking after these legislation things, and you have a few people in research only. No? So it completely turned around. It is not necessarily helping the innovation process, no? This kind of shifting, but you cannot change it. That's the requirement from the market, and we have to meet this. No?
Yeah. So what do you think, Christian, that we can look forward to seeing in the future, or what are the areas of development in finishing technologies that we need, do you think?
Yeah, as already mentioned, I have great hope in the spray dyeing. I think this could be a real breakthrough because it takes out some of the disadvantages from conventional dyeing processes in terms of more environmentally friendly, but also it gives us new effects. This is often overlooked, to have the ability to create new effects. And Rainer has already some of these installments in the market. It's already running in the market, so it's not theory what we're talking here. So I have great hope in this. Mm-hmm. I see the supercritical CO2, I see this as well as an interesting technology. What we have not mentioned now, and what I also think is interesting, are to explore ionic liquids. I wrote one article about this in an international dye journal. This is an interesting area, also in textile processing. And last but not least, to mention the plasma technology, which is a surface treatment on textile fiber material, in particular in wool. This is used, where the chemical functionality on the surface are changed, so it gives other properties in various aspects, like wettability, dyeing properties, etc., etc. This is interesting as well. So these kind of technologies. And interesting is also that all of these technologies, what we are talking now, this has all been developed in Europe. The CO2 technology, I mean, this is going back to Schollmeyer's work 25 years ago in Germany. Dyco has brought it to the market. We have to give credit to Dyco that they really were the first to have a production machine in the market, European technology. The spray dyeing, various European companies we have now offering this technology. Plasma, primarily these are European companies. That gives us hope that in the future that there is more potential. And you also have to see if the engineers cannot travel or hardly can travel, what's the point of installing the machine in a backyard somewhere in Southeast Asia? If you don't have effluent anymore, if you have less labor, you have digitalization, it would be a big advantage to have this somewhere near in the region. So I think looking forward, I'm hopeful for these new technologies that if they make it to the market, it could be in our regions as well.
Per, I see you nodding along there.
No, I agree. I think that's very relevant. I think one of the things to look out for is actually see. I mean, we are all small startups or relatively small companies here. The question is, when will the larger producers of traditional technologies jump on the wagon and get involved in this? I mean, that's a question of time because if they don't, they will die a painful death and we will take over. So
yeah, Rainer, do you agree? And what
Yeah, I would support Per's thoughts, of course. On the other side, I don't see it too complicated. What we have in the industry, of course, is a high fluctuation of top management, medium management, still operators in the textile countries. They are now in their villages. In some countries, we get a big problem to take them back into the plants. So I think we have to restart what we have done already then since 20 years. Physics, you cannot develop completely new. Basic knowledge, we have to transfer into the next generation. Should not be too complicated for us because we have done it so many decades already. But this is a big job we have to do. The new generation is taking over the medium management positions, top management positions. Operators are exchanged. Still, there will be a little movement in other countries, of course, but the training or the linkage between marketing people and technical people, I think this at the end is also part of sustainability. We see it so often that the marketing stories and the real production floor has nothing to do with each other. So this is our job with all our technology, and this is part of the training or the knowledge transfer we have to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's very good that there is more attention being paid now in seminars or in roundtables, as we're discussing now, on the dyeing and the finishing bit. Because again, there is a lot more attention and I think more mainstream knowledge available on materialization, but the true process behind it, where the true impact is made.
Agree.
And it's also more difficult to manage. If indeed, with a lack of an aesthetic or performance element, it's still difficult to communicate just the pure impact. Cheaper or more efficient production with a stronger ROI helps, absolutely. I think we always need to secure having a strong supply chain, but to communicate and to on dyeing and finishing, it's just more difficult. So it does take collaborations, communicating, education to reach the consumer and create that awareness. So I think this is actually one of the first forums that I've been in really focusing on this topic. So I think it's very good, and I hope more of these will follow, because it starts here, the real impact. Yes.
Tobias, what about for you? What's any future developments that we should look out for?
Yeah, I think more or less everything is said, but I also think that to change this game is we are all instead more or less small companies. And I think if the brands and retailers will be also more cross-linked directly to the machinery suppliers and look also with their own purchasing scouts, not only to the manufacturing plants, also to what is new in technology, and make roundtables with them, then we can drive this maybe a tiny bit faster, because then comes the pressure from the outside to change it. And I think to underline this in the future, I'll be thinking of something like a smart factory in the future. Yeah? If you look to one of our other biggest markets here in Waco, in the paper printing business, we are now at the stage that a fully autonomous printing process is happening. You don't need any guy on the machine, maybe one to observe, but the technology is push to stop, not push to start. So I think if we can come to this point that you can run a machine with process controls in the near future alone, then you can integrate also later on more easy new processes, because everything is linked to the process and everything is combined with each other, where actually some personal behaviors are playing a big role. If the management would like to go for something, but the operator don't want or has not the skill to overview the whole story, and then you will fail. So this is exactly what everybody told here. We need actually a lot of transferring knowledge, process knowledge, and also working knowledge. And this makes it very long-term integration.
Yeah.
It could be done. We do it every day, and we also have a lot of installations in finishing, also now in dyeing, but it takes a bit time to come from installation to installation.
Yeah. And Simon, for you, what do you think we'll be seeing in the future? Is it a smart factory? Can finishing be integrated into a smart factory, do you think?
Yes, so I certainly think that digitalization of manufacturing is a major trend that's not going to go away. I think that is going to be implemented in a lot of the textile industry ultimately. A lot of the manufacturing equipment and infrastructure that's installed is not suitable for digitalization. So I think we will see a lot of things being driven through based on their ability to be digitalized. So for example, if you want to run short runs of finishing and you want to press go in a US city and your manufacturing is going on in China, you want that fully integrated all the way through. I think that will drive a lot of new technologies, whether they're existing technologies with sort of digital controls associated with them or completely new processes which have digital capability. I think that will be a major trend over the next few years, the ability to fully digitalize the manufacturing supply chain.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you all for your time, Christian, Rainer, Per, Tobias, Svenka and Simon. I've really enjoyed hearing all your insights and I hope the visitors have as well. So thank you to the visitors also for your participation. Yeah, I hope you found it insightful when it comes to exploring sustainable finishing methods for textile and apparel production. I feel like we've only been able to cover a small part of it today. There's a lot more to discuss for the future, but I hope that it's given you some food for thought on how we can kind of begin to clean up the industry, I guess. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madeleine.
Thank you, Madeleine.
Thank you, everybody.